What does this novel, written in 1945, have to do with leather? Today, we're going to chat about that. Welcome, friends. My name is Taylor Sievers. This is the Blumen Handcraft channel, where we talk about all things that we do with our hands. Here we like to talk about gardening, homesteading, handmade products, leathercraft, and so on. And we also talk a little bit about the craft of writing because I am an author. So here we go. I love to go to antique stores, and I picked up this book a while ago at the store. Didn't really have any desire to sit down and read it right away, but I finally dove into it, and I'm so glad that I did. So initially I did make a video, a couple different shorts about this book. And my goal of that was to talk about the obligatory scenes in romance genre. So as an author, when I'm writing a book, we kind of do this, I personally do this on my own, sort of, like it's just intuitive in you. If you love story, you just intuitively write some of these scenes. But if you actually break down the different genres, there are obligatory scenes that need to happen in order for a story to work. And it feels wrong, like if you've ever read a story or watched a movie where something just felt a little bit off, it's usually because there's like an obligatory scene for that specific genre that was not included. So the goal of dissecting this book and sharing about it was to show you the obligatory scenes in a romance novel. And so some of those can include, like in the romance novel, we have the meet cute. So that's when the two lovers meet each other, and it has to be this kind of impactful moment. There has to be a moment where they kind of dive in and go all in on, yes, we're gonna like fall in love. There has to be a moment where maybe they like are separated for some reason. These things just naturally occur in story, and I wanted to go through an older novel to kind of break that down for you. So here I'll play the first video in that series of shorts that I made, so you can kind of see where I was going with this.
Let's dissect this novel, published in 1945. This is Wild Orchard, written by Isabel Dick. It's a romance novel. Clearly, set in 1840 England. And the story is about young Harriet Bracken, Harry for short, who longs for adventure. Every story has what we call obligatory scenes, and these obligatory scenes are different depending on the genre of novel that you're going to be reading. So in the romance genre, we have about 6-ish key scenes that we need to have in a story in order for a romance lover to be like, wow, that was a great story. Basically, obligatory scenes are just scenes that need to happen in order for the story to actually work. If we don't have these scenes for some reason, then the story is just going to feel really off. In chapter 2, we already see the first obligatory scene, and that is the meet cute. Now, the meet cute is the scene in which the two love interests finally meet each other. Just because the characters already know each other in some novels doesn't mean that there's not a meet cute. It just means it's the first time that the two people lay eyes on each other. They're eye to eye, face to face. They may be reconnecting, they may be total strangers to each other. So to back up a little bit, Harriet leaves the house after she's been banished to her room because she was eavesdropping on the cook and the cook's friend, who is the neighboring farmer's wife, Mrs. Dilliday. The conversation that she eavesdropped on is really important because she hears about this strapping young man that has come to work for Mrs. Dilliday's husband to learn how to grow hops, because he wants to be able to grow hops in his wild native country of Tasmania. So she's talking about this strapping young man, and Harry is eavesdropping on it. She gets caught and is banished to her room, but instead of going to her room, she decides to just take off, go walking down the street, and all of a sudden she ends up in a place where she has no idea where she's at. She doesn't know what time it is, and she's worried about how is she going to get back. But then she sees this really handsome young farmer who is plowing a field with a horse, and she decides, I'm going to stop and ask him what the time is. So she waves him down, talks to him. They have some little witty banter back and forth, and she finds out that this young farmer is none other than the strapping young man from Tasmania, and his name is John Anthony Nathaniel Halifax. and Harry asks if she can call him Jan for short. So it ends up that he says, I'll take you back home, and he unhitches the horse. They climb up on the horse's back, bareback, and pretty much gallop all the way back to town. So how's that for a meet cute? So if you want to keep dissecting this novel with me, make sure you hit subscribe, and we will continue to break apart this novel and discover when the next obligatory scene is going to occur. And now I just want to know, if you're a romance lover, what were your absolute favorite meet cute scenes that you have ever read? Please let me know in the comments. Stay tuned for part 2.
So in a nutshell, Harry and Jan are the main characters, and they do get married and essentially fall in love, start a family, and all of that in this book. I did not actually end up finishing my series of shorts on this because it actually does not really follow what we typically see in modern stories. It's really a book that's largely has no conflict. There are moments in the stories where there could be these, I'm like, okay, there's gonna be this huge event that happens, right? Like, this is the conflict in the book. And nothing really ever happens. It just seems like they skate over it, right? Harry and Jan live a very happy and wonderful life. It's not that they don't have trials, but it's like you're not really seeing much of that struggle. So essentially, Harry and Jan end up traveling to Tasmania together, which is where Jan grew up. He's wanting to homestead essentially on some land that his father had, and they had formerly had a tenant that was supposed to be homesteading there, and it was abandoned. And we find out that it was abandoned not because the tenant, it's because he was attacked by some natives, and his whole family, like, they all died and everything. But so this land has just been vacant for a long time, and Jan is wanting to grow hops and like start this whole sort of homestead, and he has this big dream, right? He doesn't want to work for the leather tannery that his family owns, and he's kind of wanting to get out of that pressure of that family business. He's got some conflicts with some sisters and a brother-in-law. That's probably maybe the main conflict that gets sort of resolved in the end of the story. But so basically he takes his young bride out to the wild lands of Tasmania, thinking that there's gonna at least be a house there, and when they get there, there's nothing. It's absolutely gone. The only thing that's left is this wild orchard, which is where the name of the book comes from, that they discover down by the riverbank. And again, that's a part of the story where it's like you think that something's going to take off there, because Jan finds this note from a hired hand that the former homesteader had, and talking about the destruction of the family and how this man took refuge down by the river, and he cultivated this beautiful wild orchard down by the river. So you're thinking, okay, is that man going to come back into play? And are the natives going to come attack them? All of these things, right? And again, nothing really kind of comes to fruition on that. And Harry and Jan are just building their homestead one little bit at a time. Jan works alongside all the people he hires. He really works very hard to give the people that work for him a good life. And Harry has to learn how to rough it. She's a rich girl from England that's really never had to lift a finger, and now she's learning to bake bread, and she's learning to care for her baby, and it's just everything is new. She has a husband, that she barely knew in the beginning, and she's making friends with the neighbors and all of that. They're both kind of like plunged into a new way of life, and it all seems really great and everything. And I feel like there was never a moment in the story where the lovers where they fall super deeply in love or have this sort of conflict between each other, or something's pulling them apart. There's really never any of that, which is in our modern stories what we typically have. If you go through my book Till the Cows Come Home, for example, there's a point in the story where they meet each other, they start getting closer and closer and closer, and then there's a conflict that happens, and they're separated for a time for some reason, and they have to kind of overcome this conflict and other things to get back together in the end. And you're kind of like, will they or won't they? But in the end, they do come back together. There's really none of that. There was also another moment in this story where I thought like some tragedy was going to strike, because they have a convict that they hired to be like kind of their maid in the house and like to help with the cooking and cleaning and all of that stuff that Harry wasn't used to. But this convict is a little bit like simple and has a really bad past, like unaliving a baby sort of past that was her sibling. And so you think, oh my gosh, something's gonna happen to the baby, or there's gonna be a conflict there that they have to like overcome. They're able to, there is issues, but they resolve them like really easily, and there's nothing major that happens. So it's very interesting. This novel was written in 1945 and set in the 1840s, in a different time and place than I'm used to, but it's kind of interesting to see the old ways that are talked about in this book, and then also just the mindset of people. And you wonder, like, is this a 1945 kind of worldview, or is this a 1840s worldview, or is it a meshing of both? Like, why do the people think the way they do? But I love reading old books like that because they're just so, it's just interesting to look into a different time and place and even culture. I think it really can show you how people thought not that long ago. I'm sure that if somebody from then read some of the contemporary or even historical books that we write now, they would probably have an opinion about the people of our time and our place. I loved this book in the end because it inspired me. It wasn't, again, a book that just overwhelmingly, like, the story was just outrageous, or the conflict was amazing, or I learned something new, like majorly new about like a specific time period or battle or whatever. But I loved it because Jan and Harry seem to be genuine people, and because of their genuineness and their kindness and their ability to work really hard and their ability to just persevere, the grit that they had, they were able to cultivate this. They ended up cultivating their homestead in the end, and then they weren't like, they were planning on building this big stone house and stuff, and they just decided like they loved what they had, what they had originally built, and they were comfortable, and they were able to build homes for all the people that had helped them along the way, and they created friendships, and they really brought people together in the area where they were living, just by cultivating those friendships, being kind and like supporting other people. That I just felt, it was just inspiring to me because of that alone, because you don't often, I mean, it's kind of a boring story when you think about it, right? Like, nobody wants to read a story about something like that, but it was refreshing, I think, to not have to labor over some huge conflict. It was just, I could see my husband and Jan a lot because we've worked really hard to build our cattle business and build up our farm. Our farm has changed a lot. We used to be a flower farm, and now we're working towards building a regenerative, grass-fed, grass-finished cattle operation. And I've seen how hard he's worked to make that dream a reality and make it profitable, not make it just a hobby, but like make it something that's profitable, something that can be a business that sustains our family, and has really thought about that every step of the way. And we're not like completely there yet, but we're building that. And I have my own dreams too, and Harry had her own dreams there for their homestead as well. And so I loved the partnership between the two of them and how they barely knew each other, but they were just good people that found each other and were willing to grin and bear it and work hard and establish something that was really wholesome and beautiful. And so that's something that I think about a lot with our farm and our community, is what do we want to foster in our home and our community? And that's just it. Like, we want to foster those great relationships, We want to build a business that really helps our community and fits into our community well, and maybe we can bring other people in to either help or benefit from that eventually. And so that's what really inspired me most of all. And I think if you're a homesteader in any sort of capacity, that is something that, yeah, many of us are loners, right? We just want to go build our own homestead and like want the world to leave us alone. But at the same time, I think when you get into that, you realize the value of community and the value of, I can't do all of this myself. You get to a point where you might get a little bit overwhelmed by the thought of taking care of all of your animals and like growing all of your food and preserving everything. And then you finally reach a point where you're like, it's okay to take in some products from other like-minded people or people that are doing great things, because it benefits me and them. So for example, I went down this whole rabbit hole of like, we need to grow all this food. But finally I'm like, I'm getting ready to have our fifth child removed. There's just a lot of things like we've failed at with gardening, and I just can't do it all on my own. And even with my husband helping, like it's just hard. And so finally I was like, well, there's a local organic farm that is not super far from me. They grow great, beautiful produce. Why not support them for the things that I'm not growing? That's benefiting me and it's benefiting them. And it's okay to spend a little bit of money and buy something that's good and wholesome and nutritious that someone is way better at growing, like way better at it. Their cabbages are huge, you know? So I think that that's what true community is all about. That's what like homesteading is all about. It's not that, yes, you can go out in the woods and live entirely by yourself and not deal with people at all, but we are relational people as humans. And I just think that that's kind of a lonely life to live if you're not wanting to interact with anybody else, barter, trade, whatever it is. With other people. It just makes life a little bit easier when you're able to have people in the community that you can buy from, and maybe they can buy from you, and it's a whole thing, right? And that's what this book kind of like showed me and reflected back to me. And these are thoughts that I was already thinking about, but it really put that into perspective. Certainly there are themes in this story that so totally resonate with Blumen Handcraft, just the idea of working with our hands, persevering, building a homestead, all of that stuff. So this book is totally related to kind of what I want this channel to be and what I love to read and write about. But I also have this love for creating things, and like specifically out of like natural materials, and leather is one of those. And so I said I was going to relate this back to leathercraft. You've learned that in this book, Jan's family actually owns a tannery, but he's wanting to get away from that. So why am I guess, marrying these two topics together? Do you ever have those moments where something that you're reading or watching is colliding with things like in your life that you're either learning about, or you just recently learned about, or you had a conversation with someone about? And so like maybe you have a conversation, you're starting to learn this new skill, you take a class here, and then you read a book, and then all of those things actually combine, and you didn't intentionally mean for them to combine together, but they just somehow did. And it's like this serendipitous moment. That's kind of how I felt when I read this book, because over the last several years, I've been cultivating an interest in leathercraft. I like to learn new skills, but I'm just very fascinated by this world and creating things out of leather. And it's just, there's so many uses that this product has. There's so many uses, and it feels like it's slowly getting replaced by, well, not slowly, but it is getting replaced by plastic, much like everything else in our world. And I don't want to see, this is just so practical to me to use. in our everyday lives, and we love it. So I don't really understand sometimes why we accept plastic taking over the industry where leather may have once taken over that industry. Now, that being said, the tanning process is full of different steps where things cannot be the best for the environment. And so or it's just kind of a gross business, right? Like, we're dealing with hides. We have to scrape the hides. We have to put them in acid washes. We have to do all of these things to the hide to make it, to preserve it into something where it's not going to rot away, to be useful for us. And I have a whole article on Substack, and I'll link it in the description below, that kind of gives a great overview of the process of tanning leather and the uses of leather and all of that. This book kind of gives you a glimpse into what the tannery business used to be like, right? And we've certainly changed. Tanneries are like more and more conscious about their water use, and if they're making chrome tan leather, their use of chromium and how to deal with any wastewater and all of that. So as we move towards this future of just better wastewater treatment, better use of water, just better tanning processes in general, it's really interesting to see how things were done back then. So I enjoyed the book for that. There's not a lot of details about the tannery other than they talked about the smell a little bit. Harry has an interesting quote in there. But I think we are super far removed from, just even with our own food production in general, people are so far removed from their food sources that they don't understand what it takes to go about our lives, be connected to our food supply and to our fiber and leather supply and all of that. And it's kind of stinky sometimes having a farm, and it's not glamorous sometimes, and we're dealing with weeds and pests and all of that stuff. But I think it's very important that we remember where we came from. We also learn more about our food supply and farming and all of that stuff, and understand that things are just not meant to be grown in a lab, essentially. And they aren't in the real world. Like, it's not a sterile environment, and things aren't meant to be that way. If this book interests you, I'm going to repeat the title. It's called Wild Orchard by Isabel Dick. You can probably go find a copy somewhere. I know it actually has some reviews on Goodreads. So I highly recommend maybe trying it out if you like that sort of thing, if you like to read older stories. I actually have a few more books that I picked up from an antique store that I'm going to start really soon, and would love to kind of dive into that story as a craft, and how it's changed over time, but also see what interesting little historical tidbits we can pick up from those stories as well. And then recently I've been working on an ebook. I have more of a detailed version of this ebook in the works, but I have a nice little introduction guide. If you are one of those people that loves all things handmade and you're looking to kind of pick up another hobby, or you love leather and you really want to get into leather work and you don't know where to start, I have a free ebook that I created that kind of goes over the main tools that I would include in my toolbox if I was wanting to get started. I made a lot of mistakes along the way by purchasing different tools that maybe weren't necessary, or I did get a kit which was really cheap on Amazon, but most of the tools were really inferior. In fact, today I was trying to use one of the tools out of that toolkit, which was this stitch groover, and it is absolutely useless. And I was wondering this whole time, like, what am I doing wrong with this tool? And it's just, I've learned that it's literally the tool is just not sharp enough, and it's just inferior to other tools. So if you're wanting to kind of put together an intro toolbox, and some of these great leather suppliers too will have a really great basic kit. And so also in the book, if you're like daunted by this list of tools and you don't even know what it means, there are some great actual legitimate leather retailers and craft suppliers in the book where you can go to. There are some great ones out there, and they do have beginner kits available. But if you're just wanting to DIY it, I also have kind of a list of everything that I would start out with as well. We don't go into tips and techniques necessarily. That will be something for another day. And there are so many great creators that show you how to use the tools, show you how to like literally make a saddle stitch or whatever. And I have included those people as well, people to follow, creators that really make great content that's useful and has helped teach me so much along the way. So I include those as well. So this is just like a general guide to help you get started in that world and get going. And maybe you start it and it's not something that's for you, and that's okay, but it's really fun to like have that knowledge in the back of your mind. So then when you are reading some of these historical books or books that have interesting settings, or people have interesting jobs, you can like kind of like, oh yeah, I know how that's made. Like I understand the work that's put into that. And or maybe you can appreciate like a handmade leather good a little bit more after you dabble in it yourself. So I have that linked below, and you can also go to blumenhandcraft.com to find that intro guide. So I want to thank you for following along today. This is kind of a writing craft talk and leather craft talk at the same time. And if any of that interests you, please go ahead and like this video and subscribe to the channel. I just want to encourage all of the people that view this video to find something where you can work with your hands in some fashion or another and use your mind. Let's kind of get back to old-fashioned skills. Let's get back to using these things that we've been gifted. And I promise that it definitely leads to fulfillment in life. I see a lot of friends or family members or whatever, especially young people, that I think are having struggles with that. And I've also seen some of those friends start to dive into handicrafts or baking, or just getting back to these like really simple things where you're connecting your hands and your mind and all of that stuff. And I see the joy that it gives them. And so that's what this channel is really all about. It's just encouraging that we are really privileged today in the world we live in, where we don't have to do these things. We can go to a store and buy whatever we want, but I think that we're going to lead much more fulfilling lives if we're actually going out and practicing some of these skills, using our hands, using our minds, using gifts that God has given us, working with the land. I feel like we're all better for it in that way, and our world is better for it too. So appreciate you following along, and thanks so much for watching. Go create something today. See you soon.